Hey, everybody, this is Harriet Kemick. I'm an author and speaker, and I am the founder of the Exodus Foundation. It's a women's shelter that provides services to victims of human trafficking. I apologize about my voice. I've completely lost it, but I don't know. I hope it will come back. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about colorism. And I wanted to give my own perspective on colorism and perhaps give some sort of boundaries, give some sort of parameters by which we all have observed or experienced colorism in one form or another. Uh, we can see colorism in Hollywood. That's very clear. Hollywood seems to, for many years, have favored lighter skinned individuals, especially when it comes to Black women. And we know that colorism actually comes as a residue of colonialism. Colonialism is the structure, the economic ideology and structure by which white European nations enslaved and took over nations of browner skinned people and actually used their economy to push their economies forward. Hence, today, when you look at the balance of power economically, you realize you find rather, is that white and lighter skinned Europeans tend to have more economic power. That's because they actually colonized, meaning conquered. They took over brown skinned nations and darker skinned nations. And so the balance of power remains to this day economically in the power base and the white structures of nations. So if with that start, naturally, then it lends itself to looking at people as if I am better because I have more money. That's essentially what it's saying. But it has drifted down into other racial systems and into other class systems or social systems. In India, for instance, lighter skinned people are considered to be more beautiful. It's a derivative of European colonialism. And so darker skinned people tend to be viewed as poor and without help. Well, look at us here in America today. You just need to look at our society. Our society is as racist as it comes. It happens in our society where black people were taken from Africa and taken to the new world in new Americas. And were literally, it was a human trafficking event. It's the largest human trafficking event in history, where Black people were taken from their homes in Africa, brought to the Americas, the Caribbean, Latin America, North America, Central America, and brought here to be used as slaves. And so naturally, the people who had the power, economic power, the people who had the economic power are the people who maintained that power. And so they subjugated brown skinned people, the people who were indigenous to the Caribbean, to Latin America, to North and South America. And they conquered those people and implemented and instituted their own systems of color and their own systems of government. We look at Hollywood today and we see we're light skinned as opposed to brown skinned, as opposed to dark skinned. It's something that is a little puzzling to me because I've often wondered, what does the color of someone's skin have to do with their talent, with their intelligence, and with the content of their character? I believe it was Martin Luther King who said, the content of your character, judge me by the content of my character, not by the color of my skin. What does the color of anyone's skin have to do with them? But if we look socially and societally, we begin to see that that's how the society is structured. And according to Bob Marley said this, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, we're always going to have trouble. And that's where we find ourselves today. So today we find ourselves living in a society where your prominence, your position in society is determined by the color of your skin. You might be asking, but Harriet, what is your issue? Well, my issue is that when I'm an immigrant, so I'm kind of like the trifecta of this. I'm Black, I'm female, and I'm an immigrant. So I'm the trifecta of what the society does not like, what this society tends to push aside and say is not important. So you might be saying, but Harriet, what is your issue? Well, my issue is we keep judging people based on their color. Look at Hollywood. There are multi-talented people everywhere, but we tend to see only the Halle Berrys. It's only in recent times that we see perspectives and see the talent of Viola Davis and others emerge. Prior to, it was all about everybody else who looked like Dorothy Dandridge. Or lighter skinned women were presented as better and darker skinned women were always the meat. To this day, we still see where dark skinned women in Hollywood are still beaten up. They're always the drug dealer's girlfriend. They're the drug dealer's mama. They're the baby mamas with a whole string of babies after them. They're never shown for who they really are in society. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're scientists, they're mothers, they're wives, and they're empowered women. We don't see that. And you might even say, but Harriet, still, what is the issue? The issue is that it's time for us to do away with it. In my own life, I have experienced colorism time and time again. I've experienced colorism from whites. I've experienced colorism from blacks. A few years ago, I sat with my mentor, who at the time, he's deceased now, but thanks for his life. He is a white man. And we were talking about, you're not going to believe this, but we were talking about how black men are being treated by police brutality. It was at the time of the Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter movement. And he said this, he said, I fail to understand why millionaires are complaining about how they're treated in society. And I went like, excuse me, are you serious? I said, it doesn't matter how much money they have. When they're driving their cars or when they go into a store, it's the color of their skin that you see. I said, look at Oprah. Oprah is a billionaire with a recognizable face worldwide. And she was in Switzerland and went into a store. And the clerk in the store mistreated her, not knowing that one word from Oprah could shut down their business. The owner of the boutique, who happens to be a well-known fashion designer, fired the woman on the spot when he heard about it. But the fact is, it's the racism. It's the racism and the look, the immediate look that the color of your skin determines your entry into society. I think it's time for all of us to forego that and forget about that. I think it's time for us, irrespective of how they're going to judge you, they're going to judge you based on the color of your skin. They're going to attribute to you values that you don't even have yourselves. They're going to make it seem like you come from the worst place just because. Ignore it and do what you have to do. That's what I had to do. When I first started my nonprofit, I encountered racism like you would not believe. The racism came from white women who are the ones who agree okay grants. They never gave me a grant. I could never get a grant. And finally, somebody had to sit me down and tell me that it's white women who are the grant makers. They're the ones who disperse the grants, and they're not going to give it to you because you're a woman of color. And I had to look at it within the context of economic racism. This is what institutionalized, endemic, systemic racism looks like. The continued factoring of color into one's purpose, the continued factoring of color into what people should do. And so when you look at it, you have to ask yourself the question, is this ever going to change? Not as long as we all look different. It looks like we're all going to have to be brown in order for this to change, because they're still going to judge you based on color. I have found that racism goes from generation to generation. It's the messaging that we talk about in our homes. We teach the next generation. We tell them that that black child who lives next door is not good enough to be your friend. That brown child who speaks Iranian or who speaks Farsi and is from a different place is not good enough to be your friends. Look at the racial stereotypes. We believe that all Asians, especially Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, are good at math and science. We believe that all people from India are good doctors. That's racism. And we believe that everybody who is Arab has an oil well somewhere. We also believe that people who are brown, who are of the Muslim faith, are terrorists. That's stereotyping. We believe that people who come from Africa are poor. Seriously, have you been to Nigeria? I invite you to go down to Lagos. Have you seen the kind of films that Nigeria produces on YouTube? I encourage you to go view those and you will see how people live. Racism exists. Colorism is an integral part. But let's look at the African American culture. In the African American culture, we all know we're a mixture. None of us are pure from anywhere. We're all mixed with something. It's probably not a bad idea today that most of us have done our DNA. But when you look at how our DNA composites are made, I'm so glad people are doing it, because most people are finding you really didn't come from Germany like you thought. You actually have some Italian and some Portuguese. Maybe you have some more ethnicity, but you're not going to reveal it. One of the things that intrigues me is how Black people like to say, well, I have a stash of European in me. And I'm like, why are you surprised? It happened to all of us. We're all a mixture because we're all God's people at the bottom line. God made humans. The Bible says in Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. I like to think that God is having a laugh and is humored by us and our pretentiousness to think that somebody's goodness and somebody's talent and someone's intellect is directly related to the color of their skin. I'm from the Caribbean, and colorism is alive and well. They used to say that when you're light, you're right, or something like that. When you're brown, stick around, and when you're back, stay back. Those things are residue of colonialism and slavery. It is 2020, and it's time for us to move on. The statistics say that by the year 2050, the United States is going to be brown. The majority will be a minority. The minority composition will be Hispanic and Black and every other ethnic group. That will form the majority of the color base in the United States. The majority today will become the new minority. Whites are now 68% of the population. Well, the 2020 census hasn't been done counted yet. When it's all said and done, we're going to see a shift in the demographics and the color structure. Is that likely to impact the way people view people? Not immediately, but over time it will. As we advance through the society, as we change and our perspectives change because we see more people of color in positions of power and control, that will change. It's time for us to sit back and look at what we're thinking when we look at people and judge people by the color of their skin. I myself have experienced colorism at its worst. Darker skinned women have over time treated me very badly. In fact, I did a podcast on this, I think 7 years ago, in which I talked about how they invited me to speak somewhere. And when I showed up, the women who were there actually treated me badly because they thought that I should have looked broken down, and they probably thought bad things were going to come out of me or whatever. And when I showed up, they never invited me back. They never even treated me with the decency and the respect given to someone who is your guest. That's how engraved racism is. I have a friend, she might be watching this, and her story was that each time we went out, if it's a white server who approaches the white server, would always ask me what she wants. If she asked a question, the server would answer me. I didn't realize this because I was oblivious to this. I wasn't paying attention, maybe. But she said after a while it affected her. So she stopped being my friend. She stopped going out. Everywhere we went, they treated you better than they treated me. It affected her. That's how deep colorism is. We as a society have got to stop it. We've got to stop modeling it and messaging it to the next generation so that they grow up. Hollywood needs to do a better job of choosing folks based on their talent, not based on the color of their skin or based on what they like to say, mass appeal, meaning they choose people based on numbers, based on numerics, and based on the fact that advertisers think that that will make more money or that the people will appeal to that more. There's a particular demographic that Hollywood uses. It's 55-year-old white women. Need I remind everyone that 55-year-old white women are racist sometimes? Need I remind everyone that 55-year-old college educated white women sometimes do not make the best decisions? I mean, recently I encountered that because they're the people who disperse grants. And when they look at a woman of color coming forward, it's a throwback to what they heard their grandmothers and their mothers say about women of color. And this is the reason why the United States is going to change. The demographics will change. It's happening in Europe right now, where parts of Europe are becoming brown. It's something that people have to sit back and take a look at. What will your society look like in 30 years? And and I'm just going to leave you with this. Bob Marley defined this best. He said that until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, we are always going to find ourselves in this. As for me, I'm an author and a speaker. I've published 3 books. And I kid you not, if I were white, I would be on CNN. I would be earning 6 figures. I would be all over the place. But because of my color, white media, the media that is a bastion of the society that is owned by whites, do not recognize the efforts of people and women who look like me. My name is Harriet Kimmick. This is my perspective on colorism. I also say that the Black community needs to step up and get out of the bonds of slavery. We're continuing to perpetuate the myth and perpetuate this enslavement that people are judged by the color of their skin, and that your skin color denotes and depicts what you are and who you are. We need to change our perspective. When we change it and model a different message, then the society will follow our lead. My name is Harriet Kimmick. Go to my website, harrietkimmick.com. Buy my book, Through the Fire. It's available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. And you can also listen to my daily podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Thank you so much, everybody. Be blessed.